Are you yearning to wake up each morning and ignite a new meaning and purpose in life and beyond? Welcome, everyone. I'm Michael McGinnis, an award-winning author, speaker, and educator on human potential, and your host on You Can Do It, Inspiring Growth, Igniting Potential. Life presents us with challenges that serve as catalysts for growth. The pivotal question is, how do we respond to these challenges? Or better yet, opportunities. Do we adopt a victim mindset or rise to become victors? Our goal here is to guide and inspire you to master the most amazing journey you have, your life. You Can Do It starts now. Hey everybody, Michael McGinnis here. And yes, the other way. That's what it is. It's with You Can Do It. Right? What it's all about is you. It's the opportunity for you to start considering about how to grow to become your full potential. Right? We all have this, and this is our life. So why not make the most out of it? Well, it requires a lot of growth, right? And that's the price tag. But the outcome is living life with full meaning, purpose, love, and joy, so much rich. I mean, that's the win. And that's why I so much promote it, because I had to overcome that a very difficult past, as you know my story, to the point of where living my life to a much more fuller potential. It feels like, I'm making the most out of this life. And that's the incredible gift I'm giving to myself to enjoy, what is a limited lifespan, right? So, anyways, we continue on this journey, right? We're talking about the modern day vision quest, and it was my intention to be able to leave behind the known, inspired by some great conversations and discussions. I talked last time about my mentor, himself had brain cancer, and sort of helped to push me out of the nest to say, go experience life, learn about life, right? It's only so long. And along with that were inspirations from two great movies that I had, which is Kevin Costner's movie Dances with Wolves. And it was an incredible movie because it was about him being pushed out, based on a traumatic experience, right? Sort of this common denominator sometimes, and then he went to this place out in the middle of nowhere, started with a journal, really beginning to start discovering himself. And that's where, as we're showing here, this portrayal of the framework of growth, right? The years of research that I put into this realized that there's really these stages. And the first is the personal growth, cleaning your own house, deal with your issues. And the second is this magnificent journey of self-discovery. Who am I? What do I want to be? Right? And isn't that what down at the bottom and the core of us drives us, right? This is to become ourselves, to be fully ourselves, to define who we are than what society tells us, or parents told us, or our religion, or whatever else tells us. It's about being who we are, our authentic self. And that's what self-discovery it is. But it's a deep exploration in terms of going within, really to start identifying, who we are, answering those questions. What are our beliefs? What's the values? What do we stand for? What do we want to do with our life? Profound questions that if you never answer, right? And that was the other part, the other inspiration, Dances with Wolves, is the Call by Jennifer James. And I shared that last time. Just that profound statement is as if you hear this call, right? Then you go out there and you explore. And the other movie that was really powerful and profound, it's an off movie, right? It's something not many people have heard about, but it's called The Razor's Edge. And it's a 1940s movie originally, about a person who really went out in life, and they went out overseas to really serve on ambulance into what was World War One. And of course, all the trauma you experience when you're up close and personal to all of the death and dying. Well, the amazing thing is that movie was remade later. And I forget the year, but of course, who was in it was the great actor Bill Murray. And it was one of his very early, if not first films. And it was incredible, to be able to have his character in there about growing through life. So those were the inspirations for me in self-discovery. And that's really the process that we started to go. So here we go, off and going. As you can see here again, this is the modern day vision quest. It was a phrase I termed based on, we talked about that earlier, about the Native American Indian concept of vision quest, where you separate yourself out from the day in, day out, right? The norm to go out and explore self, to take that time. I recommend it, having a journal along to be able to take that time out wherever it is and begin to sort of write and journal. Well, like I said, you don't have to do what I did. Travel is a profound aspect of it. If you can swing it, that's awesome. That's great. With the intention of being able to go places that are uncomfortable, different, so that you can really self-explore self and learn about life itself. But you can do that in many ways right in your own backyard. Even if it's just the basics of meditation, a local park, something where you can really get a chance to sort of just sit back by yourself, have some thoughts to really that you're reflecting on, an intention in effect, and then really begin to start writing about that. Who am I? What am I? What do I want to be? All of these things make for great journals. You're probably not going to get the answer on that in an instant. Maybe some do. For most of us, it's an exploration. So off I went, right, with the two intentions that I had. Intentions are powerful statements that really drive our focus. And the intentions for me, as I mentioned last podcast, was to leave, to go out and why did I experience so much pain and suffering? Why did I experience so much of it in the past? And why was that? And the second thing is, what's the meaning of life, right? Is there meaning of life? Is all of this stuff really worth it? And that was the two things that I left. So I did. Well, we're ready to go. And here's my first juncture, right? My first launch. But last time I had mentioned, my mentor, Al Pierce, and he had asked me what I wanted to do, and it was to travel, and I ultimately came to that awareness. And it was signified by like the image. If you go and see for this podcast image, you'll actually see it's the boy behind the fence. And I felt like I was trapped. I really wanted to discover what's out there. And what I realized is by discovering what's out there, I was discovering what's in here. And that was the intention, to really come to understand self. I didn't know what is self-discovery at that time. I didn't even know what that term meant. But the process was slowly but surely starting to peel the many facades that I had and begin to discover in self and begin to ask those deep questions like, who am I? Well, it was a friend of mine, you see by this image here, who I had met in one of my transformative experiences in the National Training Laboratory, and talked about that a few podcasts back. And we remained friends. Why? Because we had this intense growth experience together. Well, he called me up, right? And here I was, I wanted to travel, and remember that statement, when the student is ready, the teacher comes. And teacher comes in so many forms. Well, here's now my friend Vern coming to really help resolve this whole question about traveling. I was, "Oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to go?" And he called me up and he said, "Mike, I've got great prices on tickets. I'm going to go over and meet my brother, who you see him pictured here with." And he goes, "Let's want to go to Europe." I said, "Vern, do you know what I've just been thinking about?" And he goes, "No, this is amazing. Let's go." So let's go. So we did it. And I jumped on, on the flight. I went with him, and my first stop was Europe. Well, this was a more traditional travel, right? This was the hotels and things, because, I mean, that's all I knew at that time. And so we're sort of globe trekking around Europe as we did. Well, the first stop, well, first of all, you can see in this image here, many of these other images that relate to some really significant stops, along the way too. And it was just amazing to begin to start exploring, which is what we were doing. And part of this is, you see in this one image here in upper right-hand corner, along with my friend Vernon and his brother. Half of the world does not know how the other half lives. And it was right, right? I never knew. I saw pictures or images of these places, typically the beautiful things that we want to see it as we maybe tour a place. But really, once we go out there and begin to live in their lifestyle, is when we really do learn. The other thing is we visited Rome, and here was thousands of year history. I mean, we have hundreds of years here in the United States, as far as the kind of history we have with man-made history. But there was thousands. Here's the Colosseum, as you can see here. To go in and see something that was thousands of years old. You'd walk down city blocks, and every once in a while you'd see something of where there was no home or house, but there were vestiges of what was from thousands of years ago, pieces of the aqueduct and all these other parts of ancient Roman times. And then it was even great, there's this one cafeteria, Om Shanti, right? And, I was just starting to explore this concept of spirituality. I really didn't know that much about it at that times, but it really appealed to me, and all of a sudden here it was, this presence. Well, I spent a lot of time there and I started to really meet and greet people who live there. And they seemed to have this more spiritual focus in life, which was so awesome to start with these conversations. It was opening my mind. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But the next stop. So we were there and we started to travel around. Well, one of the areas that I really wanted to go to, I just always loved St. Francis Assisi. I really didn't even know why. But it was just something about the stories that I had heard, along the way. Simple, he loved animals, were two things that really drove an interest that I had in St. Francis Assisi. Well, there's Assisi, Italy, right? And there's the St. Francis Basilica, which is what you see here. And it was a great experience. Well, it was interesting because I was exploring. It wasn't so much about the physical elements out there, like the Colosseum. I mean, they were great to be able to see, but it was the exploring. And I found myself gravitated, in this case, to the monks who work there. And it was the kind of thing that I would ask them. I said, what brought you here? And very often, it was exactly what I was doing. Something was just not working in their life. And they realized that they wanted to make a change. And along the way, I'd heard about this opportunity and made a life change to really to go and live a life of solitude. And they would basically, they would share and talk with us. And I talked and I would learn from them some really key things in order to really simplify their life and deal with their past, their trauma, their frustration, wherever it was this getting in someplace different? But what they loved about this was they immersed themselves in the study, in this particular case of St. Francis and his life and his lifestyle and the religion that was associated with it. And they lived it every day. And it was a blast. And I learned so many things from them. And every night I would just go back and journal and journal and journal. Simple life. They live a simple life. There's not the stress of things associated with life as we experience here in the day to day, because they don't have the focus of all of these distractions and interruptions and finances. They were just there. And they focused each day as just a separate day, as a blessing. And again, all these new concepts that I'd never really heard before, but they were starting to merge and ultimately mold, allow who I would become in my life along with my belief system. Well, I continued on the journey. And of course, this was typical international travel, the hotels, the airfares, and it's pretty expensive, as we know. And so along the way, I did happen to notice that there were these congregations of younger people. And I one time was just curious. And again, having curiosity is the kind of thing you really want as part of a self-discovery, right? You got to be curious. You got to rethink about things rather than get so stuck in our current ways. So I went up and I said, what's this all about? And I discovered youth hostels. There were this way of which people from typically all of Europe and many places of the world, they would travel. And it blew me away. Here in the US, I never heard of these things. And travel was something you did as a family vacation or something along those lines. But here they traveled as a part of their youth, right? They typically had these gap years that they had, as part of before or after they had graduated. And while they were young, they did this to really to go and see the world, to figure out where they wanted to live, what they wanted to do. Well, that's one of the great benefits of Europe. Europe itself take all of Europe, it's just equivalent to maybe one portion of the US. And so they would explore all of these different cultures and the proximity they have to even to the Far East and China and Asia and all of these elements, allowed them to really to travel very inexpensively. These youth hostels charge very minimum, and you lived in bunk beds along with many others there. And I realized, wow, this is awesome. So that's what started now to start my thinking about I could do this. I could go do this on my own. I could now go someplace and really be able to travel in this way. Again, now it's opening up, right? The adventure is beginning. Well, as each time, I also would return home. And it had already prompted a major change in my life. And that was to give something back. I'd realized that there was so much to learn. And it actually was a unique case. We had an ice storm. I was living in Rochester, New York at the time, and everybody was out of power. And so here I was, I was living on my own at the time, and there was, on AM radio, I was the only way to get the news. Battery operated. There was this thing about that there are places of which the Red Cross was setting up, temporary housing, and they were looking for volunteers. So I went down and volunteered. And that was my first experience with really volunteering. I loved it. I realized how much it felt and the feelings associated with being able to help others. I loved it, and so it prompted me to start saying, what else can I do? And these are, you see here, some of the images of some of the many volunteer opportunities that I started to explore. So when I returned home, I'd already started to change. And as a result of that, I started to put focus on really exploring through volunteering, getting acquainted. In this particular case, I didn't know it was consciously upfront about the common denominator of many of these volunteer opportunities related to death. And that was the hospice care and the children's oncology camp and on ambulance. Well, that was one of the things that was really starting to help me to grapple with what life is all about, is confronting a mortality. One of the most powerful aspects of giving us a motivation for living life itself is when we confront our mortality. While we're a death-averse culture, we don't like to talk about these things. We ignore them, and unfortunately, that has a detriment to us. The fact that is that we don't accept this reality we're going to face, and when we do and explore it, we really can begin to realize how valuable this life is. And that was one of the motivations, early motivations I had to really to get the most out of this life. And every day I would be reminded of this on the different volunteer capacities, on ambulance, it was evident, right? I was going out and on a call, and here was somebody that woke up that day that didn't expect that there was going to be trauma and experience, whether it was a car accident or it was a major medical issue, something that they now had was going to change their life. And it was that experience of being with these individuals reminding me that life is so precious and to make sure we get the most out of it. In addition to it, as I shared about the hospice care, you want to learn about life, go spend time with those who are on the way out. And I really suggest that because the thing is, we're going to have all of our loved ones and family members going through this. And one of the sad parts I realized in hospice care was the fact that we as volunteers were there to compensate for the fact that family members were not there very often, or they were very limited because they didn't like dealing with death. And so they weren't there for their loved ones. Well, what a gift that is to be able to be there, especially when we've done some of our work to get comfortable with it as best you can, this concept of a role mortality and death, so that you could be there and be very present with them during their final moments. That's the most wonderful gift that we can give our loved ones and others on there. And there were other experiences that I had, and I love that life. It was a children's oncology camp. What an experience to be with those younger children who have cancer. Right. I mean, how could there be cancer? Right. And again, remember one of my intentions was to realize, why did I experience so much pain and suffering? Well, it was starting to be answered because it's all over the place. And I experienced some of the most tough situations, and I'll get to those as a part of my experience in my modern day vision quest in some of these really difficult areas. But the essence of this all is, and that's what this image is here. And I'll take some time to really focus on this for a bit. And basically, what you see is an image which you see a light here in the center, right? Well, what that characterizes, and I heard a great talk from a woman, Anita Morjani. She had a near-death experience, and she had said how the experience of her near death helped open up her perspective. And she shared a story that related to what this image is all about. And she said is that if you were in a totally dark space, so imagine if you went downstairs into a basement area or a place that was all dark, or, sometimes people go to like these caverns that are in the ground or well beneath the surface. I went to one of the famous ones up in the Northeast, House Caverns, and they would go down and flip off the lights, and it was no light because you were way beneath any sources of light, and it would be total darkness. And then the guide would shine a flashlight on. It would be the sense of relief. Oh, I can see again. But you basically just be able to see a very limited amount, whatever that light from the flashlight is shining on. Well, the reason that that's a great analogy is it's very often about our life. We grow up and we live life, and we typically live life with a very narrow vision, right? It's what we see and what we experience, and we like to stay in that known. Remember, that's the quote, the call, Jennifer James. As it's you can find comfort and joy, in the controlled setting, but real growth comes from when you open it up. And it's tough at first. It's scary because all of a sudden you're seeing things you had never seen before. Well, that's the process of self-discovery, right? We've come to know ourselves for who we are, and it's a collective of all of our experiences. We talked about peeling the onion before in one of the other podcasts, how we begin to break these things down. But if we don't do that, all we do is we know ourselves on a very superficial level. And based on what other people have told us, our parents have told us, and like myself, it was the pain and suffering I experienced, and the unhealthy beliefs I had. So I was walking through life as I realized, like this, with all of these unhealthy beliefs, yeah, experiencing, the dissatisfaction, sometimes the joy, but I wanted to know more. Who am I really? Well, who am I cannot really be answered by this kind of focus. It has to be opened by this, right? As we begin to broaden a look at ourselves. And this is the use of all of these tools for self-discovery, as I talked about them, personality assessments, all these things. But you got to have, number one, the prerequisite is a willingness to do that. And number two, an open mind, right? Because if you view the world just through this set of lens, even if I go and look at something very different, I'm only going to look at it with my current biases or prejudices or limited viewpoints of it. When you open yourself up to discovery, you begin to open yourself up to new things. Well, that's the aspect of self-discovery. The whole idea here is to be able to, with this flashlight that we have, which is our walking through life, we're going to begin to expand that and look at life and ourselves with a broader vantage point. We're going to be able to step out of the comfort zone. And that's what it is. The comfort zone is our day-to-day life, our rituals, and even the things that create the unhealthy or unhappy times, right? Misery loves company, and we can stay comfortable even when we're unhappy because it's too scary to get out of that, right? Because in order to do that, we've got to go to counseling. I don't know about that. I don't like this idea of talking to somebody and doing it because we wanted to stay within that comfort zone, or getting out, really exploring the world and or exploring ourselves, through all of these steps in self-discovery of journaling, of basic meditating, of going through the counseling, the intensive workshops that I went to and talked about before, right? They're tough, they're scary because you're dealing with the unknown, but it's the prerequisite to becoming your full self because you first want to identify who you want to be. And if we're only doing it based on all we know, it's pretty limited as far as what will likely be is the same thing. Maybe a little change here and there, but very rarely does it lead to life changes in terms of changing who we are and what we want to be, or looking at our belief system. And so that's why it's so critical in this process of self-discovery to utilize these tools for self-discovery and experiences like travel or just going to the local park, spending time on our own, which for many isn't an uncomfortable situation. It was for me, right? Of where we begin to sit on our own. And then what? We want to sort of run towards what we know, even if it's not a happy situation, we'll run to that because it's what we know, it's comfortable. And the whole idea is beginning to self-examine ourselves. Well, that's what this trip was doing to me. Already from the experience that I've had of just venturing out, that in itself was a key change. I'm willing to risk. I'm willing to make change. I left corporate America to go out and discover life. That's a massive shift in change to be able to make. Again, I know it's hard. It's limiting, and not many people can do that, but it's still for any choice that you make, it's the opportunities that you create for yourself to go and do these kind of things. Workshops locally, new sessions, travel locally to different, where you go tours or trails or nature. This is a great place to go. But to just really begin to self-examine and ask yourself these profound questions. Who am I? What do I want to be in this life? What does becoming my full potential mean to me? What is it that I want to achieve? Who is it that I really want to be on the inside? What's the junk that I want to get rid of that's not productive in my life? Right? These are all these profound questions that create a sense of unease. But it's finding these tools, support groups, right? The counseling, the therapy, the intensive workshops, the assessments, the travel. Travel is great. And why that was so profound is that it naturally gets you out of your comfort zone. I was going into new places. Well, as you realize, Europe even itself was different, although it's very characteristic of the US in many ways, very progressive. A lot of elements of the culture are similar, but yet it was already starting to portray differences. This whole idea, of the youth hostels and being able to travel and how easy it is. Well, one of the amazing things is I spoke to these younger people. I was 30 at the time, and I was meeting and talking to 18-year-olds. They had more awareness about life than I did. And it came from them taking time to travel. They thought differently. They really had a better perspective, a more global perspective than me, because all I knew was really just the US, and even there, just this few parts of the US I had been to. And all of these things started to open up my eyes, the conversations with the monks, and to realize, wow, why did they do this, what they did? And I just went out with a curiosity and an open mind and a willing to just ask people questions, tell me about their life, which was amazing. So we're going to continue the adventure, but it's about the adventure that in you, and my hope is that you begin to translate to yourself. You begin to start realizing you're shining that light. You want to broaden that light. You want to open your mind. And that's the prerequisite to self-discovery and ultimately becoming a full potential. So until next time, you can do it. Be yourself. Look in the mirror, love that person, take that time to explore, and begin to start journaling and writing about yourself. Until next time, love you all. Have a great day. I'm Michael McGinnis, and you've been listening to You Can Do It, Inspiring Growth, Igniting Potential. Tune in every second and fourth Friday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific Time on Transformation Talk Radio. As a recognized educator, author, and speaker on human potential, let's learn together how to make the most out of this life and to put a ding in your universe. This is the incredible journey of personal and spiritual growth, self-discovery, and enlightenment. For more information, visit growhumanpotential.com.